Redfield and Wilton Strategies to do a poll in July, and it found that 70% of Americans believe that children in schools should be taught to feel proud of their country. At the same time, 57% think institutional racism still exists in the United States. So, Kim, if most Americans believe national pride is something we should teach, cool, maybe we should teach that. But also, if 57% of the nation believes that institutional racism is real, shouldn't we teach about that as well?
Well, I think it's up to a teacher's discretion, honestly, in the classroom. And this is one of the side effects, I think, of the COVID pandemic, right? You had a lot of people that were able to see exactly what the curriculum was in each school because so many kids were learning virtually at home. And so I think it was a good thing, right? Now, I do believe that teachers probably should teach the good, the bad, and the ugly. And I think that's what they're trying to do in Florida. I have to say, I'm on Governor Ron DeSantis' side here. I know people are probably not shocked to hear that. But I do believe that we should be teaching some of the good parts that came out of slavery. And I say that is because there are some people that were born into slavery and they were able to take those skills that they learned and went on to be entrepreneurs. There were some of the inventions that we have today, like the folding chair with the bookcase in the back, that was invented by a man named Alexander, who was living in Lynchburg, Virginia. He was born into slavery, but he knew that there was a need there because of the church that he attended. Had they not been slaves, no, they would not have learned those skills. But of course, I am not saying that slavery was a job program. That's not what I'm saying.
I get that, but here's my concern with that. If I tell the story of American slavery in the abstract, in a vacuum, sure, right? We could talk about all the nuances of it. But this is a country that has historically whitewashed slavery. This is a country that consistently pretends that bad things did not happen. You add to that the fact that there's been a movement around the country for decades to change textbooks, to not even often talk about slavery as slavery, but to talk about it as immigration, to talk about it as a jobs program and other things that you're not doing, but many other people have done. So against that backdrop, if we then encourage teachers or encourage curriculum designers to focus on the good that came out of slavery, it becomes another way to sort of whitewash or to understate just how severe an impact slavery had. We are still to this day harmed by slavery. We still to this day pay an economic and social and cultural debt to what happened to us in slavery. So if all that stuff is true, then a textbook spending time focusing on the fact that some people got some skills out of it, to me, it's time we could spend talking about the need for reparations. It's time we could spend talking about the lingering impact of slavery. It's time we could spend talking about the people who entered slavery with skills and who were actually selected for their skill sets on the continent of Africa. We can talk about all that stuff in a finite amount of time rather than talking about a few people who were blacksmiths who were able to get jobs when, in fact, there's so many laws and programs stop people from getting access to jobs, to freedom, to justice, to food, clothing, shelter, equality, all that stuff, even after so-called emancipation.
Yeah, well, Mark, look, I still believe you teach the good, the bad, and the ugly. You teach all of it. And so I do have to ask you, without slavery in this country, which, again, you had blacks purchasing blacks, you had blacks selling blacks, you had Native Americans purchasing blacks, you had blacks purchasing Native Americans. It goes on and on and on. And I think that conversation around reparations does get very complicated. And I know that there are a lot of people that advocate for that. But beyond that, I have to ask you,
what's complicated about it?
Where would we be today without slavery?
That's a great question. That's what we call one of those counterfactual hypotheticals, right? It's hard for me to tell you where I'd be without slavery because our entire history was interrupted by it. But black people, or African people, more importantly, had empires. We had civilizations. We had governments. We had order. We had laws. Were we perfect? No society, no civilization is perfect. But the question, where would we be without slavery, would imply or suggest to people that somehow we have benefited from the enterprise of slavery, or that somehow in the aftermath of slavery we're better off than we otherwise would have been. And there's absolutely no evidence to believe that African people were better after interacting with enslavers, after interacting with the European colonists. There's no evidence of that. So I don't know where we'd be without slavery, but I'm certainly sure it's better than where we would otherwise be.
Yeah, see, and I would counter that personally with what we see on the continent of Africa today. I mean, honestly, you talked about some people having,
Where?
some of the kingdoms and being on the hierarchy in Africa and different countries in Africa, and sure, but those weren't the people that were being sold into slavery. See, so it's like it's so hard to understand.
But Kim, where in Africa? I want you to be a little more specific. Where in Africa can we point to and see any kind of problem, any kind of disruption that hasn't been touched or interrupted by Europe?
You're kidding, right? Okay, so my family is from both.
Name a country that hasn't been. You're saying Nigeria and Cameroon haven't been affected by Europe? That's your argument?
There's many countries in Africa that did not have Europeans colonize it, and they're still down today. Look at the Congo, for one thing. We don't talk enough about the Congo and what they're dealing with, especially when it comes to China and everybody that is going into their country to extract cobalt and lithium and all these things that we want here in America to make us feel good with electric vehicles. So if we want to go down that road, we can go down that road, okay? But at the same time, not every country was invaded by Europeans that then put colonization on their culture and their people. That what did not happen everywhere. But I can tell you right now in Cameroon, you have a situation where you have people running. Go ahead.
Continue. Finish your thought.
Right now. We have tribes in Cameroon right now that are trying to run from the military, run from the government, and it is black on black in Cameroon. This is what's happening across Africa. I'm not saying you being a slave from a family of slavery is great. I'm not saying it for myself either. But you can't sit here and say that your life would have been better without slavery, because we just don't know. We can look back onto the continent of Africa today, and we can say that there are a lot of places where people are leaving, seeking refuge to come here in America, because this is the land of opportunity.
So just real quick, I have to take a break. You're familiar with Zaire, right? The country?
Yes. Yes.
Right. Do you know what that's called now?
What is it called now?
Yeah, Congo. So the country you're saying wasn't affected by Europe, or it was affected by Europe because it was colonized. And it's only now being called Congo again. You also, right? My point is, Congo was colonized. When you talk about Cameroon, there's a reason why they speak French. It's not because they really love the language. It's because they were colonized.
There are many countries that were not colonized.
Anyway, I got to take a break. We'll be back. I want to give you a chance to finish your thought from the previous segment.
No, I appreciate it. So the Republic of Congo, I mean, there's a lot of issues there. Zaire is one of the countries that was moved into that republic. And unfortunately, you have African leaders in that area that has forced the people within that community into slave labor today. Even children are forced into slave labor. And like I said, those are the ones that are extracting the cobalt and the lithium that we find in electric vehicles or laptops or cell phones. And so there are black leaders that have enslaved black children and others. And so you still can't say whether or not our lives would have been better had we not been brought to America. I mean, you just can't say that. Now, could have been? Sure, but we don't know.
I knew by how close her eyes was that she was going to be on that bullshit. Welcome to Breakdown Friday. Joseph Ward, Patrick Irvin, Professor Carl Tone Jones. We are here breaking down this young lady. I really don't know what her name is. I really didn't even try to figure out what her name is, but she's basically trying to make the case that black people, specifically black people in America, benefited from slavery. And black people in Africa are in a better place because of slavery and colonization. And she has the proof. And you heard it in her argument, but never trust somebody whose eyes are that close. So, Pat, it's your first time seeing it, man. I was looking at your face and the little down and the little screen on the bottom. I was laughing over here. What do you think about her talking points on slavery and how slavery benefited Africa and her take on history?
She's not American black, is she? I don't think so.
I don't know.
She said she was Cameroon, her people.
Yeah, she did say something about being from Africa.
Yeah, so there are only two African countries that are debated to have been never colonized by Europeans. You know, I'm sure you and PC will correct me if I'm wrong. One was Ethiopia, and the other one is Liberia. And Liberia has the interesting distinction of arguably being colonized by black people from America.
What? Yeah. To be fair with Liberia didn't exist when the mass colonization was going on. So Liberia was, created. But yeah,
Right,
it was an assimilation of American and African cultures.
right. No, let's not be cute with
It
it.
was Abraham Lincoln's dream. It was to
Yeah,
send all the black folk back to Africa. Liberia
right.
came from that.
So let's and that's why I say I love to use the term because it causes conversation usually heated debate with everybody attacking me for it, which I'm cool with. But I love to say black people colonized Liberia for white people.
Right.
I ain't saying I'm just it's an interesting thought, right? It's an interesting concept.
Patrick,
Uh,
several African countries have resisted colonization.
well, I mean, she never gave a list, so I don't know which African countries. I know there's like over 50 countries in Africa, but I don't
54.
know like so. Yeah, see, there you go. So she's got a lot to choose from, but she never picked any. So I just them the only two that I'm aware of is one that has a real big ass asterisk around. Matter of fact, you could put Liberia inside of an asterisk. Um, in terms of this conversation,
It
and
don't,
you got
just move to the side.
and then you got Ethiopia, which
Right.
do we you really want to do that with? Okay, so uh, what we got going on is essentially somebody talking out of the wrong hole. So you're supposed to use the hole on the top of your head and your mouth. This one, not the one that your poo come out of. That's the wrong hole to try to sit. That hole wasn't set up for words to come out of it, but there's so many people that like to try to talk out of it. It's like the old Chris Rock joke, which you could drive with your feet, but that don't mean you should. It's a lot of people got gloves on their feet and they own the steering wheel and they just keep running into shit.
And rusted knuckles.
And that's I think this interview is just an example of somebody driving with their feet. And they think they're doing a good job, and all the rest of us is swerving out of the way so that they don't kill us. And so with that, I'm gonna say this: I blame Mark. Why, why, why is she on your? You're supposed to be a intellectual. You're supposed to be a thought leader, academic. I know those of you that disagree and you don't think he that smart. I get it, but he's supposed to be, and he has a large platform. At what point do we hold Negroes with platforms responsible for who they choose to put on their platform? We hold the schools responsible. We hold the schools responsible for letting scholarly read and Suki Booty and all of them other people come up and dance in front of the high schoolers. We hold the colleges responsible for having foolishness on their campus. When do we hold the black media outlets and intellectuals responsible for giving platforms to fucking people that don't really bring anything to the conversation? So there's that aspect, and then there's one other aspect I want to just touch on before I land my plane. I don't understand. So one, the whole argument was kind of silly to me because, like, before she went stupid, I don't understand why this is still a conversation. Like, why are black people still asking white people to teach our kids? I don't understand the basic premise of why we continue to have this conversation. Like,
because they remember that time that Martin Luther King said that specific thing in that one speech that time, and then people forgot all the other stuff.
Well, no,
King said.
No, because you can't even say that because there ain't ever been one thing that King said in one speech one time. Like
See now you trying to use truth, Pat, and you asked the question. I'm just trying to explain it to you what they're doing.
Because I'm like okay, why we keep Okay, so we know that white people don't want to teach their kids a certain message, and we understand that because we don't want to teach our kids a certain message either. But see, what the disconnect, and I'm confused is, okay, white people like they run the public schools. That's what they do. They kind of do that shit when it comes to like group stuff and running stuff. Even when they don't like each other, they kind of do that. That's kind of their thing, right? That our thing is singing, dancing, and entertainment. They think is kind of like power and using it over people that like to sing and dance and other things.
Powerful.
So what I'm saying is, if they do they thing in that area and they don't want to teach their kids certain things, why we going into their area and wagging our finger? Why don't you just teach your own kid what you want? All right, I'm done. All right, I'm done. I'm done.
But
I'm done.
but see,